And specifically on Ceca, this FTA with India benefits Singapore in many ways. Signed in 2005, it was India's first comprehensive bilateral FTA with any country. And Ceca gave Singapore a strategic first-mover advantage in India just when the continental country was taking off to be an economic powerhouse. Ceca reduces tariff barriers, which made Singapore goods more competitive in the Indian market. And partly because of that, bilateral trade between Singapore and India has grown by over 80%, from 20 billion Sing dollars when Ceca came into force in 2005 to 38 billion Sing dollars in 2019. And similarly, Singapore's direct investment abroad in India grew by 50 times, 50, from 1.3 billion Sing dollars to 61 billion Sing dollars during the same period. In 2019, 660 companies from Singapore have investments in India, almost double the number a decade ago. As these companies grow regionally, they hire more people back home, and in 2019, they employed 97,000 locals. Despite these significant benefits, FTAs are controversial in many countries. As a trade negotiator, I've listened to the problems and sensitivities of many of our FTA partners. What are these sensitivities? Some countries wish to protect certain sectors, such as agriculture. There's a very common one, which Singapore does not do. We have some eggs, we have some fish, but more for a bit of source diversification. We never seek to conquer the world with our eggs and our sea basses. Others could not live up to, say, the transparency standards of, say, government procurement or intellectual property disciplines. Still others are concerned about the influences of foreign culture through industries such as arts and entertainment. Canada, for example, very sensitive about this area. So the toughest job and the most time-consuming job of a negotiator is to identify and understand the sensitivities of your country, and then find ways to protect or to address them. How do we do so? We find words that give you comfort, that address the sensitivity. And we call these words, in our jargon, exceptions or carve-outs. When we have a big carve-out with strong protection in our sensitive areas, we will say this carve-out is strong and big enough for a jumbo jet to fly through. In some sensitive areas, it is easy to negotiate exceptions or carve-outs because everyone agrees. One example is right of taxation by governments. Another one is national security. A third one is immigration. Every country holds the view that there cannot be unfettered movement of people across borders. Every FTA partner believes that. That would create social unrest and a big public uproar. Governments must retain the ability to impose immigration and border controls, and FTAs cannot undermine that. Hence, in all FTAs and also WTO agreements, you will find that immigration powers are strongly and prominently preserved and protected. You can find such standard clauses in the WTO agreement as well as in all our FTAs, including Ceca. As so many falsehoods have been said about the immigration-related parts of Ceca, let me set out in some detail what is really in the agreement. Immigration matters are set out in Chapter 9 of Ceca, Movement of Natural Persons. The legal text is available online, so I will only detail the salient points. One, the chapter makes it clear that government's ability to regulate immigration and foreign manpower is not affected by the agreement. The government retains full rights to decide who can enter the country to live, to work, become PRs, or become citizens. This is clearly set out in two clauses. they are standard clauses commonly found in all FTAs. And they are also the second and third paragraphs of the chapter of Ceca. So it is hard to miss them, as you can see them on the first page. I will just read them out. Clause 9.1.2. This chapter shall not apply to measures pertaining to citizenship, permanent residence, or employment on a permanent basis. Clause 9.1.3. Nothing contained in this chapter shall prevent a party from applying measures to regulate the entry or temporary stay of natural persons of the other party in its territory, including measures necessary to protect the integrity of its territory and to ensure the orderly movement of natural persons across its borders. That's the first point. Second point, the obligations relating to the movement of natural persons in Ceca, as in all FTAs, are not broad principles with wide applications, but actually highly specific. What are these broad principles that you can find in FTA? One broad principle is that of national treatment. It is found in some chapters of FTA, such as trade in services and investments. This means, I mentioned this just now, this means you cannot discriminate against foreign service providers and investors. Whether they are local investors or foreign investors, you treat them the same. Regulations and benefits that apply to local firms must apply evenly to foreign-owned ones. So, if immigration had not been carved out and national treatment principle had been incorporated into Chapter 9 of Ceca, then indeed, Indian workers would have to be treated like Singaporeans and would have had free rein to come to live and work in Singapore. That is what the PSP claims, except that there is a strong immigration carve-out and national treatment is not found in Chapter 9 of Ceca, nor any other corresponding chapter in the FTAs that Singapore has entered into. Mr. Speaker, sir, I emphasize and underline and highlight and bold with bigger fonts, color red, that nothing in this agreement implies Singapore must unconditionally let in PMEs from India. Contrary to PSP's claim, our ability to impose requirements for immigration and work pass has never been in question in Ceca or any other FTAs that we have signed.